Thank you, Chairman. Ms. Dhillon, you recently announced that DOJ was launching an investigation into the University of California over its UC 2030 capacity plan, which notes that future growth of faculty and students should result in campus populations that better reflect and tap the talent of underrepresented populations who represent the majority of Californians. In the SFFA versus Harvard opinion, the Supreme Court held that nothing in this opinion should be construed as prohibiting universities from considering an applicant's discussion of how race affected his or her life, be it through discrimination, inspiration, or otherwise, allowing universities to continue assessing students' experience with race on an individualized basis. In that opinion, in his concurrence, Justice Thomas praised the University of California for achieving diversity through race-neutral policies, including preferences for low-income applicants and first-generation students, and recruiting efforts targeted at areas with substantial populations of people of color. Are the race-neutral policies like those used by University of California, which Justice Thomas explicitly praised in that opinion, now considered by you to be illegal DEI?
Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, I'm your independent political analyst, no spin, no tribalism, just straight talk and evidence-based commentary on what's really going on in Washington and around the country. Today we're diving into a recent and charged exchange from Capitol Hill featuring Senator Adam Schiff and a DOJ official, Mr. Dhillon. The topic: the Department of Justice's investigation into the University of California's UC 2030 capacity plan. But the discussion quickly expands beyond hiring policy into questions about affirmative action, race-neutral admissions, the Supreme Court, cancel culture, and the broader role of government in higher education. Let's break this down piece by piece, with balance and context. So here's the setup.
Well, Senator, first of all, the investigation that we've opened is an investigation, and it's an investigation into the hiring policies of the University of California system, not the admissions policies. That said, I have absolutely seen abuses in the admissions policies in using race as a crude proxy for discrimination.
That's not the question I asked you. Are the race-neutral policies praised by Justice Thomas now considered by you to be illegal DEI?
I think you're mixing apples and oranges, so
well,
I can't really answer your question.
You can answer my question and say, yes, they are now illegal. That is what Justice Thomas praised in terms of race-neutral policies, which include preferences for low-income applicants, first-generation students, things like that. Are you now saying that what Justice Thomas praised is now illegal in your view?
Senator, there's a difference between what you see on paper and what you see in reality, and I reject your premise. I reject your premise that how California describes its admissions practices is
about whether
reality.
You subscribe to the Supreme Court's opinion or whether you disagree with Justice Thomas' concurrence. You can answer that question, can't you?
In the abstract, yes. In reality, what you're describing does not exist in the UC system.
Okay, so Justice Thomas got it wrong. Is that what you're saying?
I'm not saying that.
Well, you are saying that because he was praising the policies of the University of California. You seem to be saying now that any university that gives a preference to low-income applicants is engaged in illegal DEI, or if they put a focus on first-generation students, that's somehow impermissible. After all the years of criticism of cancel culture, you seem to want to cancel any institution that has views that you disagree with. In answer to the questions about law firms, you want to cancel law firms because they take on unpopular clients to you, to the administration. That is, if a firm represents someone with an adverse interest to the administration, which is their First Amendment right to do, and I would also say their duty to do, you would cancel them. You would cancel universities like Harvard or the University of Virginia that take positions and exercise their First Amendment rights contrary to what you think the administration wants to see. You would cancel the Associated Press for not using the ridiculous nomenclature of the Gulf of America. You're canceling now the Wall Street Journal because the Wall Street Journal had the audacity to publish an article about Trump's connections to Jeffrey Epstein. So this is what's going on in this administration. You've devastated the Civil Rights Division. Hundreds of attorneys, 368, have departed since January of this year. There's been a mass exodus from the Civil Rights Department. It is just a shell of what it used to be. They're being canceled. They're being canceled by you, by the department, anyone that stands up to this president is at risk of being canceled. And I think what you're doing to use the sledgehammer of federal funding with universities to try to coerce them to accepting your right-wing agenda is disgraceful. And using that cudgel will have far-reaching implications, attacking research done by universities, academic independence done by universities. It will establish a dangerous precedent that can be abused by a president of any party, and we should recognize that on a bipartisan basis, even though it does not appear that we do. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Kennedy.
Senator Adam Schiff is pressing the DOJ on why it's launched an investigation into the University of California system, specifically its hiring practices, not its admissions policies. The UC 2030 plan calls for campus growth that better reflects California's diversity and helps tap into underrepresented talent. On the surface, it's a plan rooted in inclusivity and workforce development. But Schiff's concern goes deeper. Is this administration, via the DOJ, criminalizing or undermining policies that are not only legal but previously praised by the Supreme Court? Senator Schiff brings up a key legal backdrop: the Students for Fair Admissions versus Harvard decision. The Supreme Court ruled against race-based affirmative action in admissions, but critically left open the ability for schools to consider how race has impacted an applicant's life in a holistic review. And in his concurrence, Justice Clarence Thomas specifically praised the University of California not for using racial preferences, but for implementing race-neutral policies like prioritizing low-income, first-generation applicants and targeting recruitment in underserved areas. Here's the kicker. Schiff repeatedly asked Mr. Dhillon if those exact race-neutral practices praised by Justice Thomas are now being considered illegal by the DOJ. And frankly, Mr. Dhillon doesn't give a straight answer. Instead, Mr. Dhillon draws a distinction between policy on paper and how it works in reality. He implies that even race-neutral language may mask discriminatory outcomes depending on implementation. That's a nuanced point, but Schiff isn't buying it. He accuses the DOJ of essentially moving the goalposts, punishing schools for trying to achieve diversity legally, now that race-based affirmative action is off the table. From Schiff's perspective, what's being called illegal today is the very model the Supreme Court just held up as lawful. And that's where this gets politically and legally messy. Now, Schiff's tone escalates. He accuses the DOJ and, by extension, the administration of using federal funding and legal investigations as a cudgel to silence or punish institutions that dissent from their preferred policies. And he expands this into a broader critique, citing examples of law firms allegedly penalized for representing unpopular clients, universities threatened over academic independence, the Associated Press, the Wall Street Journal, and others supposedly canceled for reporting or language choices that don't align with federal narratives. In Schiff's framing, this is no longer about UC's hiring practices. It's about freedom of thought, academic freedom, and the right to dissent in a democracy. What makes this moment particularly interesting is that Schiff is a Democrat. Typically, these types of critiques, cancel culture, government overreach, and First Amendment infringement, come from conservatives. But here, Schiff flips the script. He's arguing that the DOJ, possibly in pursuit of a more ideologically rigid definition of DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, is going too far and risking long-term damage to constitutional freedoms and the independence of public institutions. His warning is clear. Today's weapon could be tomorrow's precedent. And once a party in power starts using investigations and funding threats to enforce ideology, the whole system becomes vulnerable no matter which party is in control. Schiff also points to the departure of 368 attorneys from the DOJ Civil Rights Division since January, a staggering figure if accurate. He frames this as evidence that the DOJ is driving out professionals who won't align with the administration's enforcement philosophy, hollowing out one of the most vital departments in the government. Whether it's ideological purging or internal dysfunction, it's clear there's serious unrest inside the department. And that's something every American, left, right, or center should be concerned about. So what's the takeaway from this hearing? Here's my neutral analysis. The DOJ absolutely has a role in ensuring that hiring and admissions policies are non-discriminatory. That's not controversial. At the same time, race-neutral strategies like targeting low-income, first-gen students are not only legal, they're crucial tools in building opportunity for all. Schiff is right to call out potential mission creep, where the DOJ's legitimate oversight risks turning into ideological enforcement. His broader point about free expression and institutional independence is one worth hearing, especially when it comes from someone who has often been aligned with federal power structures. Ultimately, this hearing reveals the fragility of bipartisan consensus on DEI, civil rights, and academic policy. And it shows how even well-intentioned tools of equity can become flashpoints in a larger political struggle over who gets to define fairness in America. Thanks for watching. If you found this breakdown helpful, please like the video, subscribe for more neutral political insight, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Do you agree with Senator Schiff's warnings? Or do you think the DOJ is right to take a harder look at how diversity policies are implemented? Either way, let's keep the conversation respectful, informed, and grounded in facts. Until next time, I'm your independent political analyst. Stay curious, stay critical, and as always, stay engaged.